Oh. Whew. Sorry, just dreaming about the new Tudor Black by 54. How much I love that watch. I really want one.
I don't understand why you
What is going on, Watch fam? My name is Michael. Today we are covering Cartier because they have some insane releases, and we're going to play a little game that I made up called How Many Watches Is This Brand Actually Going to Make? Because Cartier sometimes does very, very limited runs. They don't release a lot of watches. Typically, by the way, there is someone else here. He's loud, he's kind of Italian, and he's in Geneva right now looking at watches. So I'm covering in for Christian, but this is Watches and Wonders week, so obviously we're gonna release 2 videos at least. This video is sponsored by headphones.com, so you can hear me mess up what I'm saying in crystal clear audio. More on them later. So anyways, I came into this watch world wanting sports watches, just like everybody else. Actually, I came into the watch world wanting vintage watches. And then I shifted over to sports watches because they felt a lot more appropriate for my daily routine, which consisted of sitting at desks and getting in my car and driving to another desk here in New Jersey. So I thought definitely need a sports watch. But Christian has been slowly corrupting me, and now I do love Cartier. I also love vintage dress watches, believe it or not. I have this VC on its way to me right now. It actually should be getting to my house today. It's signature required. And you know what? One of the people I know in my building is in Japan. The other person I know in my building is also at Watches and Wonders in Geneva. And poor me is just getting my luxury wristwatch delayed a few days. Anyways, today we're looking at Cartier watches. First off, we have the Tank. This is, I've always, I save the best for last, both in the limited quantity game and the watches. There's a little thing I have to say about the last watch, but that's that. So we'll start off with the Tank. Cartier is always just tossing out some tanks. Last year they did the Solar Beat, which was amazing. Huge hit, but Cartier could not source all of the electronics needed for the Solar Beat, so then they discontinued it. It was kind of a secret, disguised good thing, because now that I'm getting more into Cartier, we'll talk about Cartier hands in a little bit, but I don't think the Solar Beat would be the exact watch I want. I have to go vintage. But anyways, they released 4 new tanks. They all use the 1917 movement, which originated as a ladies movement, but now it can go both ways, 2023. You know, there's not much to say really. We have a green lacquer dial, a red lacquer dial, and then these crazy tri-gold color dials. All of these watches are solid gold, which is interesting because it looks like this is a mix of Must Cartier and actual, not Must Cartier, like solid gold Cartier. So we don't have a price yet, but still, interesting blend of the two. Very cool, and the tri-gold obviously is something that Cartier has done for a very long time with their tri-gold rings. I don't know what else they've done, but I don't know how I feel about those tri-gold watches, to be honest. I'm not the biggest fan. I don't hate them. If I was gonna put it in context of what I think my girlfriend Taylor would wear, she wouldn't wear that. I actually got her a vintage Cartier Tank a while ago in sterling silver with a cream dial, which is beautiful. So she'd probably just keep that one. None of these would really get her fancy. Anyways, though, typical Cartier size is 33.7 millimeters by 25.5. Small watch, but since it's rectangular, it wears a little differently, obviously, than a circular watch. So it feels a little bigger, but it's still a small watch. The only odd thing, which I don't particularly know Cartier's reasoning behind, is that it's a mineral crystal. It's not a sapphire crystal. I don't know why that is. Obviously on the Speedmaster, it's because it's the original type of crystal that was used, but it's also less reflective, but it doesn't shatter like glass, like a sapphire crystal, so it's safer on the Speedmaster. My best guess here is it's either cheaper, but I wouldn't think it's cheap enough for Cartier to think it's worth it. My main guess would be the lower reflectivity makes it clearer to see the dial. Since there are no numerals, you probably, like a reflection is way worse because you have no reference, but who knows? Limited edition, it is not. So far, this game is a ton of fun. This video is sponsored by headphones.com. If you are into watches, chances are you are probably slightly into photography, also slightly into cars, also slightly, I don't know, into rare, obscure things that are better than what you can normally get somewhere else. Anyways, the reason I'm saying that is because headphones.com is the exact place to go if you're into audio. And if you are not into audio, if you're not an audiophile, I highly suggest that you become one. Because one, It's a ton of fun. And two, it's just a whole nother place to dive into where you realize there's a whole vertical staircase going straight up of different levels and different tiers, and you start to hear better separation in music. If you're editing, you start to realize you want a flat profile. There's all this stuff to consider and all these things to think about. Headphones.com sent us Focal Batises to try out, and they are fantastic. They sent a pair for me. They sent a pair for Christian. Christian and his dad, Rolly, use them for just for fun, listening to music, watching Netflix, talking on the phone, whatever. They really enjoy them. But I use mine for editing so I can hear details more clearly, make sure there's no static or crackles or anything like that. What's really cool about the headphones is that there is noise cancellation, there is heavy noise cancellation, then there's transparency mode. So you can block out some sounds, you can block out virtually all sounds, or you can turn on transparency mode, which is exactly what it sounds like, where you can hear everything going on around you, which is great. Also, they have a 3.5 millimeter jack, they have a USB-C jack and Bluetooth, and there is a built-in DAC. So if you want to go crazy, you can use the DAC on USB-C while you're editing or while you're listening to music to make sure you get the absolute best quality audio that you can possibly get. But thank you so much, headphones.com. Really love the headphones. Really love all of you. Headphones.com, they got the domain. Next up, Santos Dumont Skeleton. I'm probably going to say those things wrong, but I'm going to give it my best shot. There are three here. There obviously is the standout one that is in yellow gold with a blue lacquer on top of the watch. That is insane. That is one of the most beautiful watches that I've seen in a very long time. Both of these pictures just blow my mind. I want that watch so bad. There's no way I'll get it. We'll talk about it in a second. This is Cartier being Cartier. This feels like the 1920s and 30s, like people on planes flying things that don't really work too well. Like, not that they have a solid gold. Well, they probably were very wealthy back then, so maybe they did have watches like, well, they did, because the Dumont was the first watch that was flown. But either way, what I'm saying is this gold one with the lacquer dial and stuff, they definitely didn't have. But it just feels like that era. It's gorgeous, is what I'm trying to say. Alongside the beautiful yellow gold one, Cartier also released a rose gold and stainless steel model, and it uses the in-house caliber 9629, an automatic caliber, because you're probably wondering what that thing is at like 7, 8 o'clock. That is a micro rotor. That plane right there is what is charging the watch as you walk around with it. That is Cartier beating everybody else. They're basically the best, most renowned jewelry of kings brand in the world. You expect them to come out with stuff this good. But when you see stuff this good, you're like, wow, you did great. That's awesome. The one thing that do I know Anthony? Do we DM? Okay, so I am friends with Anthony. Anthony and I follow each other on Instagram. Anthony, you wrote this amazing article, but you said, sure, I could have done without the little model plane zipping around the globe, the micro rotor, but that's Cartier, weaving its historical narrative into its modern brand, sometimes even to a fault. What? You think the plane is a fault? That's the craziest part of the watch. That's why I like the watch, besides the lacquer and the gold. That's the weirdest take I've ever heard, Anthony. Do you not like ice cream because it's too sweet? Babies because they laugh sometimes? Money because you can get cool things with it? Cars because they make it easier for you to travel? And of course, that was also not the only skeletonized movement that Cartier released this year. We'll get into that later, but they also released this crazy pocket watch. Just throwing that out there. The limited game. These watches, rose and steel, are not limited, but the coolest one, of course, is limited to 150 pieces. It will sell out immediately. They're probably already allocated. As Christian always says, these watches are basically sometimes gifts to huge Cartier clients, which actually there was a Hodinky comment that made a really funny joke about that I will tell you later. The new Cartier Tank Américaines. I'll be honest, not a fan of this watch. I don't think it looks the best. I'm sure yours looks better than everybody else's if you own one, but it doesn't really do it for me. Not my favorite Cartier watch. But as the Hodinky article says, the Tank Américaines lineup includes 11 total watches across 3 sizes: mini, small, and large. And then they go on to say, apparently this means we'll have to pour one out for the medium size. See, this is a trick that a lot of places do. There's an ice cream shop I go to with Taylor in Massachusetts. They don't have a small. They have a kitty, a medium, and a large. And Taylor is always like, oh, I can't believe they don't have a small. I'd love a small. And I'm like, no, the kitty is the small. It's just a different name. The mini, small, and large means you have a small, a medium, and large. I know technically there's a hidden different case shape missing, but The small and mini Americans use a quartz movement, and the large uses the caliber 1899. These are not limited. So far, this game is not probably the most fun, but that's all right. Okay, next up, we have the Cartier Santos Dumont XL Dumont, in 3 precious metals. And also, that's actually the least cool part about these watches. These watches are beautiful. And they have brigade hands. So what's crazy about this is each one of these dials has indices that are cut out of stone. Those stones being jasper, jade, and dumortierite. I'm not rich enough to be able to pronounce that stone with any accuracy. But of course, it being Cartier, they take it one step further, and the cabochon, the stone, is the same color as the actual indices, which is just unbelievable. Of course, these being very beautiful watches, limited by Cartier, 200 pieces each. So not bad. You probably can't get one, but I think they're available immediately. So if you want one, call right away. Or Cartier has 2 models that are not limited, which a possible deterrent, which it being Cartier means probably plausible, not possible. But there is the yellow gold blue dial and the 2-tone gray, yellow gold, and steel, which are both sized large, 43.5 millimeters by 31.4 millimeters, as compared to 46.6 millimeters and 33.9 millimeters. These are not limited, but the top comment right now is that they are quartz. So non-limited means you get a battery. Then we hop into, it's funny, initially, the Santos de Cartier, I didn't like the modern version because I was such a big fan of the old version. And I had a lot of old versions. Actually, in college, I had a crush on this girl's sister actually, and she came to school and visited the college, and I was wearing my Santos, and she was like, wow, I've never seen a watch like that. That is the coolest watch I've ever seen, which is every watch person's dream, and it very rarely happens. So I was like, oh yeah, it's a Cartier. And she was like, wow, can I try that on? And I was like, sure. And then she put it on and was like, I love this watch. This is the most beautiful watch I've ever seen. I like that you wear women's watches. I think that's really cool. And I was standing there like, am I dreaming? You also think it's cool that I wear women's-sized watches? But she turned out to be a terrible person and we never dated, so that's fine. Anyways, though, Cartier released one new color, but they also released the blue Santos in a medium size because previously it was only available in large. So small-wristed folks, get them while they're hot. My friend's sister will probably be attracted to you, which is really cool. Nothing crazy to report here. These are just dial changes, so they're incredibly beautiful. I guess I like the green better, but the blue is also amazing. Not limited, nothing crazy. Okay, finally, this is always the big thing for watch nerds or watch collectors. This is the whole point of the Cartier Privé collection. I'm probably saying that wrong, but if you don't know, the collection Privé Cartier Paris, or CPCP, is basically Cartier being like, okay, we know that we used to, in the 20th century, make some of the most beautifully designed wristwatches that you've ever seen. They're iconic. Everybody basically confidently says, these are some of the most beautiful watches ever made. Obviously, though, Cartier was one of the first brands to ever switch over from these very small production numbers to massive production numbers. In doing this, they kind of had to go against what a typical jeweler of kings was doing, which was these incredibly small batch releases, which Christian showed me a graph one day that showed like Cartier made 60 tanks one year and 20 tanks the next year. They made virtually none. So they went from really small production to then very, very large production, and then kind of found themselves really just churning out ladies' quartz watches. And then the Privé collection, I think the original Privé collection, was Cartier kind of acknowledging that, okay, we can and we should look back on our history and make the marvelous watches that we used to make with some things that kind of modernize them, but we should bring those back. So anyways, this year, the Cartier Tank Normale comes back in force. These are always limited edition, but this is Cartier being Cartier with their limited edition and with their designs. And this is where we'll talk about hands for a second too. Even Hodinky says it's a selection of limited edition numbered watches for what the brand calls the collector's collection of its most historic and mythical models. And nothing is more mythical than the original. This is not a perfect recreation of the original Cartier Tank Normale, but it's close enough, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and it comes on Cartier bracelets. You could collect Cartier bracelets and like the watch bracelets, not like Cartier jewelry bracelets. And that's even a whole saga in and of itself. But the original Tank Normale, obviously with most original Cartier pieces, was very, very small, kind of cool. I've seen 2, I think, in the wild. They're tiny watches, 27 millimeters by 19 millimeters. And now, more modernly, it is 35.2 millimeters by 27.8 millimeters, which is still a small watch. And the author of this article, Mark from Hodinkee, great article, says, I do wish the brand had used Breguet hands to hearken to the original instead of the Epi hands from the 1940s Normale. I totally agree. I'm all about the Breguet hands. Cartier, in the era of like when they were doing the first tanks and stuff like that, they were using Breguet hands. And to me, that just lifts up the entire value of a Cartier watch to an unfathomable degree. Those watches are incredibly beautiful. They have that perfect level of, it's like they're dainty, but the case is just so simple that it still looks masculine. I think that's fantastic. So yes, Mark, I totally agree. But now we get to Cartier being Cartier, of course. These watches are not only limited, the limitedness of them is tiered depending on the watches. I totally understand why. And then obviously we have the great Hodinkee comment. Cartier being Cartier, you can't say we're going to harken back to how we used to do things in very small quantities and then release something mass market. It kind of loses the magic. That being said, I would love it if they did that because I would definitely get one. But each is limited to 200 pieces, each of the regular collection. Then on top of that, they are making 50 more in yellow, gold, and platinum with their signature, with their skeletized movements, which are very beautiful, 24-hour movements, gorgeous. And then, of course, they're doing an even smaller set, 20 pieces diamond set platinum skeletonized watches, which, okay, you could do those in 5. I don't really care about those. I don't personally want one, so you could even release one. Wouldn't bother me. But to the people that get the 20, congratulations, great watch. So yeah, anyways, it's cool just to see these watches. I made a joke in the Rolex release video that essentially Rolex just releases a bunch of pictures every year that are really cool to look at. Cartier actually does that even harder than Rolex. To me, I feel like Rolex is that guy where we all make fun of him and we're like, oh, he doesn't release anything, can't keep up with demand. And then if he walked in a room, he'd be like, hey guys, sorry, I'm super busy back there. I'm working on making more watches and I will soon. Everybody in the room would be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Yes, dude, that's totally cool. What's up, dude? How are you, by the way? And then Cartier would walk in after and be like, hey, I said I was going to make 20 watches. I'm just not going to make any this year. I don't feel like it. I have to go. That's Cartier's vibe. T. Keen from Hodinkee said, super glad it's a limited edition, so rather than ever having a chance of buying one, I can just see it on Eric Koo's Instagram. I thought that was awesome. But he's like also the only person in the world that has an incredible Cartier collection. So if you want to see these watches in the wild, definitely give Eric Koo a follow. Anyways though, that is about it. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Either way, check out the Theo and Harris watch shop if you want some watches that are immediately available right now.